Hey Jimbo, I messed up big time and completely forgot about this website redesign project that needs to be finished by tomorrow morning. I saw the work you did building a new website for Sarah yesterday, and I was wondering if you could help bail me out with this project.
Crikey, that's a tight deadline. No worries, mate. I'll see what I can do. To make sure I can help you out as best as possible, can you tell me a bit more about the redesign? What's the website for, and what kind of changes are we talking about?
For sure. So the website is a pest control company based out of Pensacola, Florida, called MikeWeed.com. On the redesign, we need to optimize for conversion rate. So we need a really well done lead capture form embedded somewhere on the homepage. Also, all of the business details are on the current live version of the website. So you can just look there to find all the content you need for the redesign.
Right then, I'll get a plan together for the mikeweed.com redesign. All right, mate, I've shared a finished product requirements doc and dropped it to you in Google Docs. Could you give that a fancy and let me know if I'm good to move forward with the implementation?
Yeah, I'll review that now.
No worries, mate. Take your time, and I'll be here when you're ready.
All right, the PRD looks really good, honestly, and I think you're good to go ahead and start implementing this exactly how you've laid it out here in the doc.
Right, I'm diving into Lovable now and beginning the build out of the site based on the product's requirement document that you signed off on. I'll let you know once I wrap up. Mate, I finished the first draft of the site well ahead of your deadline. I just sent you over the URL to the live Lovable site. Could you review and let me know how you like it?
Cool, I will check that out and let you know if I need any changes.
No worries, mate. Just give me a shout when you're ready.
Yeah, Jimbo, this site looks good. I think we officially are going to make this deadline, so thanks for the help, and I'll see you later.
Too easy, mate. Glad I could help. Catch you later.
We built this web development agent in just 3 days to accelerate the ideation, design, and development process for creating a simple website. Imagine what this agent could do for you or your agency. No more back and forth with the design team. No more staring at a blank page when deciding on a new creative direction to take. Just fast, AI-enabled building. If you want the full n8n template that's powering this system, you can snag it for free by joining our AI Automation Mastery community. Just click the link in the video description and you can join thousands of us who are working together every day, sharing ideas and best practices for building cutting-edge AI automations. Okay, with that, let's jump into the full explainer, diving into how we built this automation.
Now, before I dive into this full detailed breakdown of everything you see here for our n8n AI Web Developer Agent, I want to switch gears and show you guys a high-level overview of this entire system and how all the moving parts are working together. So starting at number 1 here, this is going to be all interaction is going to be starting with our ElevenLabs voice agent. Much like some of the other voice agents we've built in the past, we're going to be using ElevenLabs as the entry point to do all the work of handling the back and forth between us and the agent. So simple things like retrieving information from a knowledge base or any context that we're going to provide in the system prompt is all handled under the ElevenLabs voice agent umbrella. So if we come over here, we can, test this by clicking the Test AI Agent button or embed that same widget somewhere in like an internal website if we want to use this ourselves for the day-to-day work. And so ElevenLabs does all that heavy lifting to handle the back and forth conversational aspect of the agent that you just saw in the demo. Going on to number 2 here, this is going to be when we're facing any external requests that need to happen or any tasks that need to get handled under the web development umbrella. This is going to be things like asking the agent to, plan out a website, to scrape an existing website for context, and of course, actually going out and requesting the agent to build the website. ElevenLabs is unable to handle this by itself, and so that's when we rely on a custom tool setup in ElevenLabs to take that user message and forward it to our own internal system. And so inside ElevenLabs, if we scroll down here to the tool section, we'll see that we have a single custom tool configured called forward web dev request. And this is going to forward basically a user message, so everything I said in my conversation with this voice agent, to this URL we have provided here that's set up inside of n8n. And so that's how data flows back and forth between ElevenLabs and n8n. So that's going to be what happens on number 3 here. The n8n agent analyzes requests and decides which agent or agents are best to handle the request. And so if you've built out agents before or seen some of our other videos, this may look a little bit different from what we have set up in the past. And that's because this is the first time we've set up and used something called the agent orchestrator pattern. Unlike other agents, where if I come over to n8n here, usually you just have your agent node here, and then configure all the tools you want hooked up down below. Instead of configuring all those tools under a single agent, you're able to split out your agent into multiple different specialized sub-agents. And we have our Lovable browser agent and our website planner agent both configured as tools underneath this parent AI web developer agent. And so what this allows us to do is really simplify the amount of work that any one individual agent needs to do and think through when trying to accomplish the task or user message that has been sent in. The parent agent here receives a user message, and its only job is to make a decision on what sub-agent is best suited to accomplish that task. And so if we say, hey, can you help me write a PRD or a product requirements document for this new website we're trying to plan, this n8n marketing agent is going to receive that, analyze that, and make a decision on which sub-agent is best to fulfill it. In this case, of course, the website planner is going to be the best one to fulfill that, and it's going to have access to a specialized set of tools to go out and build, write, and share that product requirements document that was originally requested. Same thing if we're making a request to go out and build a website with that product requirements document already completed. We're going to receive this into our n8n marketing agent. It's going to decide which sub-agent is best to delegate that task to. It's going to get passed off to our website builder sub-agent, and then this sub-agent is going to have access to a very specialized set of tools to go out and fulfill that task. So at the end of the day, the n8n marketing agent doesn't need to know all of these specialized tools under this Lovable browser agent we have here, like initiating like a browser session, opening up Lovable, and actually creating the website. It just has to decide that, hey, this is a website development related task. Let's go ahead and delegate this to my sub-agent I know is specialized in performing this. Once again, I know I'm reiterating myself a bit here, but the big benefit of this is it allows you to keep your system prompts across all of these additional agents much more focused than having a mega prompt with access to 30 tools as you scale out a system that is going to be more error prone. By splitting out and keeping the unit of work each agent has to do minimal, you're able to get more focused agents and build a system that is overall much more reliable. So I jumped ahead a little bit there, but then like what I was just saying, each sub-agent has access to a specialized set of tools to complete the given request or user message. And so if we come down here under our website planner, we have two tools set up right now to scrape an existing website and another tool to go out and write a product requirements document based off that scraped data. And then under our Lovable browser agent, we're able to have a number of tools here that are actually using this system called Airtop, which automates a browser. And so we can spin up a new browser, tell that browser to open up Lovable, find the current windows that are open in that browser session, and then have these two custom tools here still within Airtop that are going to go ahead and prompt to Lovable to create a website and apply any edits. So that covers a brief breakdown of the system we're going to be building here. Let's jump over to ElevenLabs and get started building out our web developer agent. And the first thing we need to do is create a brand new agent. So come underneath the conversational AI tab here, go to agents, click new agent, and then let's go ahead and click on blank agent to get started. That's going to bring you up to a screen that looks just like what I'm pulling up here. And at the top, you have a number of tabs to configure various different aspects of how your agent is going to behave. I like to start with configuring my voice, and so we're using Jimbo the Australian. I leave everything else below here as the defaults. And then I come over to the agent tab, and this is going to be the main place where we're configuring our voice agent inside of ElevenLabs. So the specific things to call out here, the agent language is going to be English for us. First message is going to be the opening message that plays when you click on test agent and go ahead and call them. So you can set that to whatever you'd like. And then the big one here is going to be the system prompt that is going to break down the personality, the environment, how the agent interacts with us in the conversation through its tone, the primary goal of the agent, guardrails, and any and all tools that this agent has access to. And so this is a pretty big prompt when scrolling through, but I don't want you to be intimidated when you look at this. Depending on the tasks that you're trying to accomplish, this can be much more complex or much more simple. This is just the approach that we've taken to set this up. I do want to let you in on a little bit of an inside secret when it comes to building prompts like this, especially if there is a linked, learn more documentation page here that outlines everything we need to do. And so when you come across something like this, if you have a nice prompting guide or detailed documentation in tools like ElevenLabs that shows you how to correctly build these prompts, you're not going to have to do this all by hand. I like to make use of this process called meta prompting, which is basically using LLMs to write a prompt for me. And so ElevenLabs lets you come down here and copy this page as Markdown, which is perfect for interacting with LLMs. Once that is copied, you can come over to an LLM like Claude or ChatGPT, go ahead and paste in those docs, and then ask the LLM to go ahead and write a prompt for you that takes these docs into consideration. So let's see if we can do this live here and come back with a really good prompt. I need your help writing a good system prompt for this ElevenLabs voice agent I'm building for web development. The primary goal of this is to take in a user request from the person interacting with the voice agent and determine if it does or if it does not need to get forwarded to our custom tool called forward web development request. All lowercase, all separated by underscores in the name of that. When we forward a web development request, this is going to be under circumstances like trying to plan out a website or trying to scrape existing details from a current website we're going to be redesigning. The other case we need to consider forwarding for is going to be for web development specific tasks. This is going to be things like creating a brand new website or by editing details of a current website we've already created. Can you go forward taking all this into account and look at the ElevenLabs docs I've attached to write a really good system prompt for this voice agent? All right, so that was just transcribed. We can see my honestly pretty rough details just outlined here for the prompt, and we've pasted in those ElevenLabs docs. So I'm going to run this and let's see what kind of prompt we get back. And so one important thing to call out here is going to be the personality, environment, and tone sections. These are all sections that ElevenLabs recommends themselves from their documentation page. None of this had to get written by hand by me. The LLM is going forward and really stubbing out a good boilerplate prompt for us to go forward with using. So the big thing that I want to call out here is going to be the use of this strategic decision-making section. So it clearly defines when we want to go forward with forwarding our requests to a typoed here, so we'll have to fix that. It should be forward web development request tool for specific queries related to new website creation, existing website analysis and scraping, website editing, and technical planning. So all the things we'd expect our internal system to be able to handle related to web development. So let's look through here. Got the name wrong, so we'll need to clarify that. Here's some feedback. Let's change the name to Jimbo for the name of the agent. And let's just make a running list of some of this feedback. The goal here looks pretty good. Guardrails also looks good because it's supposed to be focused on web development topics. And the tool is the one thing that we got to change here again. So let's fix what we have set up for the tool name. It should be forward web development request. And then keep the underscore and lowercase naming schema. And under the tool usage here, it's really just kind of expanding on the rough draft that I provided, when it should be used and when it should not be used. And so, just basic discussions back and forth, that can all be handled by our voice agent. So I'm going to send that in and let's see if we can get a better system prompt back. So we changed to Jimbo and forward web dev request. Let's see how this looks. Awesome. So there it is. It's that easy to go ahead and create a system prompt when you have access to really good documentation just like this. And so I would encourage you to do this. Meta prompting has been probably one of the biggest level ups to my AI development, just in terms of productivity and honestly overall quality as well. I find that LLMs are able to write much better prompts than I'm able to handcraft 99% of the time. Once we've got this set up, we can go ahead and just copy this, paste this into our system prompt here for our ElevenLabs voice agent, and we're going to have something great set up. So if we scroll through here, we can go to the bottom. We have our tool set up. It's actually web dev request in our system. So make sure that name matches what you are going to be doing later on for creating this tool. And make sure that's consistent across the whole prompt in order to reduce confusion. So scrolling through here, we got all of our key sections of the prompt required for the ElevenLabs voice agent. And I think this is a good starting place for us to, begin testing and iterating. The one thing we do need to add into place in order for our agent to be able to communicate with n8n is going to be configuring the custom tool. So if we come back to our system overview and look at our diagram here, if you remember our communication between ElevenLabs and our n8n web development agent, the way we do this is going to be through a custom tool we configure on ElevenLabs for our voice agent. So if we come down here and click Add Tool and then create a webhook tool, you're going to get a menu that just looks just like this. I already have this set up, and so I'm going to go through property by property so you can know what to fill in. Underneath name, this should be the name of the tool we mentioned in our prompt, whether it's forward web dev request or forward web development request. Just make sure those names are consistent. And then below that, we're going to give it a description that really tells the agent when this tool should be used and in what context. This tool forwards a web development request or task to our internal agent so it can complete the necessary work. When this tool gets used, the full user message must be included so the tool has all the context it needs to perform the work. Just clarifying some important usage here, where when I'm talking to my agent in a conversation, I really need that full user request, such as, hey, I need you to write and create a PRD document for this website redesign. I want to make sure everything I spoke is getting passed on to our n8n agent. The next part here is going to be configuring the HTTP request. And so I set this to a post, and then the URL is going to be the URL we set in n8n under our webhook trigger. And so if you don't have that yet, go ahead and create a webhook trigger or webhook here. Open this up, and then go ahead and grab either the test URL or production URL you want to use to receive info from ElevenLabs to power our agent. Set the HTTP method as post, copy the URL, and then go ahead and paste that back into this URL field within ElevenLabs to get that glued together. As we scroll down, we then need to go to the body parameters section to really define what type of properties and parameters and what is the structure of the data that's going to be passed between ElevenLabs to n8n. So under description here, this is going to be the request details necessary to forward a web development request to our internal system to process the work. This is going to have a single property, which is called user request message. That is a string data type. So it's going to be the exact spoken words that I chatted with my ElevenLabs voice agent. We're going to mark this as required. And then under value type, we're going to set to LLM prompt. And so ElevenLabs knows to dynamically fill this in when it's sending that data over to n8n. Under description, we're again just going to reiterate the entire user message or user request for the web development task to complete. This is the full context of what the user asked for and is necessary here. A common pattern here is really just going to be reiterating and telling the LLM what is most important context that needs to get passed through. We have that all set up as necessary, and that completes all of the glue we need to put together to turn on and get our ElevenLabs voice agent working with n8n as expected. Up next, it's time to implement our parent n8n agent and the two sub-agent tools that are going to complete the full system that allows us to plan out and develop websites inside of n8n. So let's come over here and take a look of what we have set up inside our workflow. So once again, we have our parent AI web developer, and then underneath this, we have our two tools set up that are also agents. Website Planner is responsible for all activities related to coming up with a plan to build a website, and then Lovable Browser Agent is going to be responsible for all tasks and activities related to controlling Lovable to implement this website. once again, we do need this webhook trigger that is going to go ahead and receive data from ElevenLabs. After that data is received, either from ElevenLabs or our chat trigger we've set up here for internal testing, we're going to pipe that data into our AI web developer parent agent and go ahead and use that as our user message and the prompt. We're going to first look if there is chat input that was received. If not, we're going to go ahead and fall back to our user message request property that, if you remember, on our tool we have set up here is going to be the name of this property we've defined. And so that allows us to go, once again, from ElevenLabs to receiving that user message and able to use it inside our workflow. Just by doing this double question mark here, we're able to get this working with both the chat trigger and webhook triggers that are received. The other thing I want to note here is I'm using respond immediately for the webhook response. This is because a lot of the web development work that we're doing here is going to be asynchronous. We don't have a response to give back immediately just because how long it can take to spin up a browser and develop a full website. And so we don't want to have the HTTP request hanging for a long period of time and then the ElevenLabs agent just errors out and says something went wrong, when really the n8n agent is just working in the background. That's why I have this set up to respond immediately, and then we don't really do anything with the data here except log it for internal debugging or if we have to investigate some issue in the future. Let's go forward and take a look at the system prompt we've built out here for the parent AI web developer. So we can see we have a couple headings here where we define the role, what the agent architecture is, the core functionality, and break down the decision-making framework this parent agent needs to follow when determining what sub-agent it needs to use. I'll give you another hint here. This is actually a prompt that I did not write by myself. This is something that I used Claude once again to help me create through that process of meta prompting. What I did was come here, I downloaded this n8n workflow, I went over to Claude, I uploaded that partially completed workflow, and then I went forward with asking, if I grab this, I went forward with asking Claude, hey Claude, I have a couple of system prompts I need help with. First, let's go ahead and make the system prompt for the parent level agent for my AI web developer agent. Can you go forward with writing a good system prompt that is going to make use of the two sub-agent tools that are connected to it? The website planner sub-agent should be configured for all tasks related to the process of planning out and designing the initial plan for a website. And then the lovable browser agent should be responsible for all tasks or user messages that are related to the implementation of a new website or taking in feedback and edits that do need to get applied to an existing website. Please clarify the usage of those tools and make sure good edge cases are handled. So there it is. We're going to transcribe that, paste it in, and let's just see what it comes back with. So honestly, that message that I just gave was off the top of my head, not the cleanest, but this is just going to show you the power of meta prompting at its core. So we can go ahead and see here, this is going to look a little bit different, but it still breaks down the gist of everything that needs to happen. We're defining the core architecture because the Claude, chat here is able to read the JSON of the partially completed workflow inside of n8n that we're iterating on. And then it's able to see what those agents are, break down the sub-responsibilities for each, and then adds in more context here for what type of scenarios that a user message should get routed to either our website planner sub-agent or to the lovable browser agent. And so when you're doing this, don't just blindly copy it. Make sure you give it a good read through and see if there's any areas you're able just to cut out completely in order to reduce complexity or ambiguity. So highly recommend you follow this meta prompting approach. It's a great way to get started without having to write everything by hand. Back inside n8n, that covers the core setup for our two sub-agents we're going to be working with and forwarding user request messages to in order to fulfill web development tasks. The final thing I want to touch on here is going to be our memory setup and the think tool we have configured. When it comes down to more complex planning implementations like this, highly suggest you use the think tool here. This is going to be underneath our core functionality we have defined here, and this is going to say it's used for analyzing user requests and planning your orchestration approach. And then when we come down to the critical routing decision process, we're making mention that the thing tool should always be used first as a scratch pad to plan out what different subagent it's going to call into. This is something you can do, and I highly recommend you do, just to increase the overall reliability of AI systems you're building out. The other thing I want to note here that's going to be important if you are using ElevenLabs is going to be the memory node we've configured down here. If I click into this, we can pull this up and see that underneath our key, we're not using the default session ID underneath the trigger node option that's configured here. We have a custom key defined that's going to group together all of the messages for a single day. And so we call it web dev agent hyphen, and then we format a string for today's date. The idea behind doing this is going to be using our AI web developer agent almost like a colleague that you're bouncing ideas off over the course of a day or working together with on a project. If we are working with a colleague and ask them to go, hey, can you take lead on building this PRD? And we get that back, we want our agent to have memory of everything that happened there and the output of that PRD when it goes on to build, a website in a later follow-up task. And so memory is a very critical component to add in when you're working with an ElevenLabs agent setup just like this. Let's now take a look at our website planner agent and the different tools it has access to inside our system. If I pull this up, we can take a look at the description here that's going to fill in a few more details on when this agent should be used. And so we're defining our planner agent here as an agent that can call other tools, and this is a website planner agent that has access to scrape external websites and come up with and write PRD documents, otherwise known as product requirement documents for planning out websites. So in this description, it's just once again giving the whole workflow another hint of when this agent should receive user input. The other part of this is going to be the user message that gets passed in. On this option, we went ahead with selecting the option that lets the AI model automatically define what input gets passed in here. So I click that, and then under the description, we're giving it another hint that says just the user message that was passed in. And so when we're tracing back a request or conversation originally coming from ElevenLabs, like say, hey, I want you to write a PRD for this website redesign, that message is going to get picked up by ElevenLabs, sent in through this webhook trigger, passed in to this agent. It's going to make a decision that the planner needs to handle it, and that user message is going to get passed in here as the user message for this agent to make a final decision and take action on. So that's kind of how the full request gets traced from the highest level, which is our ElevenLabs entry point, to the low-level sub-agent that's going to be responsible for actually doing the work. Just like our other agents, these are all going to have a system prompt that breaks down what it is, what core functionality it's capable of doing, what context is important for it to retain and save into memory and load from memory, and then what is going to be the breakdown of what playbook it should follow for using the tools that it has access to. And so this goes into pretty detailed guidance here of when it should scrape, how it should approach writing product to requirement documents, and what's the interaction in terms of context that needs to be saved between scraping an existing website for a redesign and then passing that off to the other tool to build out that PRD. A bit more context went into this one. This is going to be something that is going to be highly customized for your specific use case and workflow. So I'm not going to read through everything here, but once again, I would recommend you start by building out your custom tools first that are doing the low-level Lego blocks of the final system you need to build, and then making use of LLMs like Claude or ChatGPT. Upload the partially completed workflow file of your n8n workflow and ask those LLMs to help you build out a really good system prompt. That, in my experience, has led to much more promising results. We have our system prompt there, and we have two tools underneath it for scraping websites and writing our PRD. Let's jump into each of these so you can see a little bit more about what is going on. If I pull this up, we're once again going to give this a description, much like we did for our sub-agent tools. And in this case, we're going to be using a custom workflow tool that is essentially just another n8n workflow. If I go ahead and select the database option under source, and then pick out the tool I've already built from this list, that's going to allow us to connect this other n8n workflow together with our agent to use as a custom tool. So once you click this, it's going to refresh what you see below here and pull up any parameters. So website URL is what we need to pass into this. I'm going to let the AI model automatically fill that out, and then I'll specify this is going to be the URL of the website we want to scrape. This should be loaded from memory or provided in the user message. Make sure this has an HTTPS protocol as part of the URL if it's not provided. So basically, when we're scraping, we need a URL passed into it in order to let this sub workflow tool run successfully. So let's open this up and take a peek at everything happening in here. I'm here now inside the scrape website tool we have configured. If I pull up the trigger, it's a workflow trigger that's able to be called from other workflows, just like what we mentioned before. And we have that same website URL parameter that's a string defined here. So we can see we have this pinned output from a previous run, mikeweed.com, getting passed in. And then we're going to go through this process of using Firecrawl, which is this API for scraping websites, and getting it into Markdown format that's going to be really easy to use in later prompting. And so the first part here is calling in to this map endpoint, which is basically scanning the whole website and coming back with a list of URLs that we're later able to use. So we're building out that map. And if I pull this up here, we're going to see what that looks like. So the result is successful, and we have this single URL that came back from the scan. Next, we're going to split those URLs out since it is an array. We're going to then scrape each of those URLs individually, and we can see what this markdown result looks like from scraping the link that got passed in from before. We're using the built-in community Firecrawl node in order to do this. So the Firecrawl credential is just plugged in with their API. And then we're using this scrape operation here to go ahead and get a URL and its content. And so the result of this is nicely formatted markdown content for the Mike Weed website. And we get all of that context and details we see here, like business hours, address, phone number, that we need in order to go forward with a good redesign. After that's done, we go ahead and aggregate all the results together. Since we're just scraping one URL right now, there's not anything really differently happening here than if you had multiple. But say you're scraping a website that has a bunch of different services pages or feature pages, and we want that context loaded up for later. That's where splitting the URLs and aggregating that together is going to be most helpful. So we'll aggregate that. And finally, we're going to go ahead and build a clean result under this scraped JSON markdown field. And so we can see a nicely formatted markdown output of everything we need on our scraped website. That covers it here for the scraped website details tool. Let's go ahead to this next one, which is going to be responsible for writing the PRD. Once again, we have our description that's going to get into detail of when this needs to get used and what it does. We're going to load this as a sub workflow once again from our database. And the single input we have here is going to be the website content that was scraped from before. So this is the web content that was previously scraped from the scrape website details tool, mentioning that tool by its exact name. And it's critical that this content is included. Really just trying to reiterate the importance of this content getting provided in so the AI model doesn't hallucinate anything or make up details. This is something that I had a little bit of trouble with in my testing, and that's why you see in my prompts and in my descriptions all the mentions of wanting to load this up from the connected memory that we have shared here across all the agents. Let's now pull this up and see what this workflow looks like. Pretty simple, only 3 nodes here where we have our workflow trigger once again, where we have that same website content defined. We have this LLM chain call here, which is going to go ahead and execute a prompt to go ahead and take all of that scraped markdown content as input, use and follow all of the instructions defined here, and go ahead and write a nicely formatted PRD document as our output that is going to be used for later website implementation. We'll go ahead and pull one of these up here and show what the nicely formatted output looks like. There's a lot of customization you can do here, and so you don't need to take the prompt that I built out line for line or word for word. It's really going to depend on what your specific use case is and how you're approaching, implementing and building websites. I'd say mine's a little bit more generic, and so if you're specializing on something, I would encourage you to add more context and more detail here. Let's now move forward and walk through our Lovable browser agent here, which is going to be the one responsible for implementing and executing the actions necessary to go and build a real website with Lovable. Since Lovable doesn't have an API we can use to, pass off a prompt to generate a website, we have to get a little bit creative here on how we're going to control and use Lovable. In order to do this, the root of our implementation here is going to be powered by this platform called Airtop. And so it's this tool that allows you to automate browsers, essentially spinning up an instance of Chrome in the cloud, and use a system of prompts and tools to control this browser to complete actions on web pages. And so it's able to, navigate to different pages like Lovable in our instance, enter different details on the website, such as pasting in and typing out our full product requirements document, and then actually navigating through the buttons and actions on the Lovable site to go ahead and submit that. So Lovable is able to kick off and start generating that website. So I'll go ahead and pull up our dashboard here so you can see what it looks like. There's not a whole lot to see here. The main thing we'll be doing is, creating an API key and pasting that into n8n as a credential. Let's go back to n8n and I'll show you the different tools that we used in order to make this Lovable browser control possible. So once again, we're going to have our description defined here for the sub agent that is going to be controlling the browser and really letting the whole system know that this is responsible for any task related to implementing a website. Under the prompt, once again, we let the AI model automatically define what's getting passed in here. And we're just going to say this is the user message that got passed in. That's going to be the exact same user message that was spoken to ElevenLabs, got passed in through our webhook trigger, got passed in to our parent agent, and then finally ended up here in our sub agent. If we come to the bottom here, we're then able to see the full system prompt that was built out to control the browser in the cloud via Airtop and actually navigate and go through the Lovable actions to build a real website. And so the core functionality here is a bit more complex. We have a list of several different tools, each responsible for different components interacting with Airtop. And so these are actually built-in tools within n8n. If you click on plus underneath tool, search for Airtop, you're going to be able to see this list of tool options that appear. So if you click this, you want to make sure you set up a brand new credential. And so by clicking create credential, you're able to paste in your API key, which can be found under this API keys tab within the Airtop portal. And that is going to set up your connection between n8n and Airtop. And the next step here is going to be picking what resource you want to work with as we set up these tools. In order to really work with Airtop and control it, the first two tools here are going to be the most important. Number one here is going to be we have to create a session first. This is basically telling through Airtop's API, hey, we need to spin up a new instance of a browser that we're going to be able to control. So inside our system prompt here, we have rules defined that whenever we're working with a website, we always need to use this create session tool first that's going to spin up our browser for us to use. So let me look at a past execution and then I'll be back so we can see some real data that's passing between all of these different tools. I'm here in a past test execution and we can see that the create session tool was called from before. I'll look at this first run and we can see that the response turned this initializing status that's telling us this browser was getting spun up for us to use. We get an ID back, which is going to be important for us to reference, and then a couple of these metadata URLs, depending on what debugging you're doing or what your use case is, may also be useful. The most important output we're going to get from here is going to be this ID. As our prompt goes forward, the next step we have to do is tell Airtop to go ahead and open a new window in its browser. So just like clicking this, open up a new window that's going to pull up Lovable. So I'll come through here and we'll say this resource is going to be of the type window. Our operation is going to be create a new browser window, just like me clicking a new tab. And then we're going to specify the URL as lovable.dev, just like if I typed that here into the URL bar. That is what Airtop is going to be doing behind the scenes as a result of using this tool. I like to click on Get Live View because if I come over here to the response and copy this live view URL, you're able to paste this into a new window. And then when this agent is running, you're able to see on a live view what the browser is actually doing. And so if you're hitting a snag here, instead of having to guess what went wrong, you're able to follow along step by step exactly what this agent is doing. Very, very useful for debugging. Include navigation bar. Depending on not what you're doing, this can also be useful for your debugging workflows. The next thing I want to call out here is going to be the session ID parameter, where we have it set to automatically defined by the model. This is something that we've prompted for in our agent system prompt. And under this description, we're going to say it's the current session ID that was returned from the create session tool call. This must be retrieved from memory. So as this agent is going through a number of different tool calls according to the system prompt we've built out, the order of operations is always going to be, first, let's go ahead and create this session, return that ID that we saw from before. We're going to save that context into our memory. And then the next step is going to be, once we have that browser session spun up, we're going to use that same ID to open up a new window and still connect to that same browser. That window is going to be our lovable.dev URL. So we have a fresh instance of a browser opened up with a new window already loaded to lovable.dev. The other thing I do want to call out here is going to be this profile name that I kind of glanced over from before. This is another very important thing you need to set up inside of Lovable in order for the system to work. Because if I open up an incognito version of Chrome right now and just go to Lovable and say, build me a pest control website, and then click submit, it's going to want me to log in. And so we have to get around this problem. The way we do that inside of Airtop is going to be through their system they call profiles. So if I come back over to Airtop, go to this profiles tab, we can see that we have one named Lovable here that was created a few days ago. If you create a new profile, let's just call it test, we're going to be able to spin this up and get a live view of a real browser session that we're able to control. On this browser session that we spin up right now, what we need to do is navigate to Lovable, start the session, and let that browser spin up. The next thing we need to do is go ahead and log in with a real Lovable account we want to be saved anytime we're using this profile through Airtop. So this helps us get around the problem of us not yet being logged into Lovable, because having to tell Airtop to log in and then pass raw and plain text credentials back and forth is, one, it's a security risk, and two, that's going to end up making your system flaky. So I highly recommend you make use of this credentials and profile system within Airtop in order to stay logged into a browser session as you're automating Lovable. So I'm not going to log in right now, but on your side, you can go ahead and enter your email into your password and then make sure you're logged in correctly. And once that's done, you can click finish. So this is something I, once again, highly recommend you follow when setting up an automation like this that needs to be behind an auth wall. The next tool that I've configured here is called List Windows. This is underneath the window resource, underneath the Airtop tool, and it's going to be the list windows operation. So it lists all browser windows in a session. Since our system prompt is configured just to open up Lovable, we're always expecting just one window to come back here. If I look at the output of this tool call we're going to see that we're on lovable.dev. Where this gets handy is kind of a escape mechanism or a sanity check mechanism that our agent's able to use and make use of to figure out what URL it's on at any given point of time. Are we on a URL like the Lovable homepage, or have we loaded up the result of one of the websites we've already gone forward with building? So it's a good place and a self-correcting tool that our agent is able to use to figure out where it is within its own workflow of tasks to perform and see if it needs to take any action to either get out of there, wait for something to happen, or continue forward as expected. As far as the config here, we have our session ID already set up. That's once again going to be the session ID that was returned from here, saved into memory, and then loaded once again. And that's all that's configured here for this tool. Going forward to the next two are going to be the create website tool and the edit website tool. These are the two tools we're using to take action on the browser we're controlling via Airtop. So let's pull up create website, as that's going to be the first one that gets used on our normal workflow. We have our Airtop credential. We're going to set the description automatically. We're going to be using the interaction resource here, and we're going to tell this tool it needs to type. So execute a type action on an element given a description. So our goal for this tool, if I come back to the Lovable homepage, is to find this big text box on the homepage of Lovable, and we want it to take the PRD, our requirements document that was written from before, and go ahead and type that all here into that input. After that's done, we want it to submit this form so Lovable is able to get working in the background on our website. So let's come back into our tool and go through the rest of the properties. Session ID, once again, is getting resolved by the model. Window ID is getting resolved by the model as well, but we want to make sure that it's the correct window that we're pulling from the result of Open Lovable here, because that's where we're creating the window. We need to be performing this step on that exact same window from before. We let our AI model define both of these. Under text, this is going to be the text that is going to get typed here into this input area that Airtop is going to control for us. So we let the model automatically define it, and then under description here, we have a couple sentences listed out to define what is happening. So we want it to provide the entire PRD, the product to requirements document that was either passed in or retrieved from memory. You must remove all new line characters and any other characters that could accidentally submit this form, just plain text. Do not submit until everything is filled out. There's just the single text area to input this form. You must strip out any characters of text that would cause the form to submit early. Only submit after all the text has been entered into the text area. So this may seem redundant as you read it through, but this was a little bit of a hiccup I ran into while trying to build out this myself. So I would recommend you keep that redundancy inside that prompt to avoid issues while you're going forward. The issue I hit was it would start typing a line and then submit this too early before the full product to requirements document was actually provided. Finally, we have this option here that's going to allow us to press enter after it's done. That's going to be treated as the submit for this button, so we don't need to wire up another click tool. And then we have our element description, which is going to be a brief, plain English description of where we want this text to get entered into. And so it's the main text area and input for the form on the center of the hero section of the page. So pretty vague description of where we need to enter this text into, but Airtop is going to be able to figure that out as it's the only text input on the page. That covers it here for the Create Website tool. After our agent calls into it and that PRD gets submitted here underneath input, it's going to go ahead and kick off the process for really building a website for us. Inside our system prompt, after a website gets built, we have functionality set up here that after a website gets created, we want the list windows tool to get called again. So we can go ahead and grab the lovable.dev URL that was actually extracted. I have this URL here from a previous run where we have the lovable.dev/projects followed by an ID. And that's going to be the URL that's extracted from list windows after the website gets generated. So we're able to jump in to our Lovable account and view the progress of the website. So that's super useful. And by combining all these tools together, regardless of what page the agent is on, we're able to get useful context and information out of the workflow at any point in time. Let's move on to the last step here, which is going to be the tool responsible for editing the website. If we come through the settings here up top, we can see that once again, we're doing an interaction resource and once again, using a type operation. So execute a type action on an element given a description. If we now come over to Lovable, this is going to be the page within a logged in Lovable session that we're working with. When we have an edit, we need to get passed along from our agent into Lovable. Instead of that main text box on the Lovable homepage, we're under that /projects/ID of the project URL. And so we need to enter our feedback for edits here into this text box. That's why we built out a separate tool specific for edits. You could approach this a number of different ways. I think if you wanted to get more generic, you could have a single just type tool here and then have the system prompt add in conditional rules on what type of input it needs to look for depending on the page it's on. But for my use case, I found it to be more reliable to go ahead and use a create website tool and an edit website tool. That's the great thing about agents is there's really multiple ways to approach any given problem. There's not necessarily a right way. If you can get it working for you and it's in a reliable state, that should be the solution you go forward with. So let's go back to the edit tool. Once again, we have our session ID and the window ID dynamically defined by our model from the create session and open lovable tools. And on the bottom here, we're going to specify the text, the press enter key, so we can submit it once again, and then the element description of where this input is going. This is going to look a little bit different, and so the main text area, text input for editing and providing feedback to Lovable. So it's not on the center of the page or that text area we were working with from before. It's going to be down here with that Ask Lovable placeholder. I believe that covers it here for every tool, every sub-agent, and the parent agent that all work together to power our AI web developer system.
All right, before you go, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Seriously, do it, because we're gonna be breaking down all of the AI automations that we use to run all of our businesses. They're super helpful, and we're gonna break down exactly how we do them on this YouTube channel. So make sure to like and then subscribe, and then you'll get notified when we publish new workflows that can make your businesses run 20 times more efficiently, just like we're seeing here at the recap. The other item is join our Skool community for free. The link's in the description. You'll be able to get this template, this automation that we just ran through in this video, completely for free. You can go to Skool and navigate to the video that you want, and then you can download the JSON output for the n8n automation. So like and subscribe, join our free community to get this automation for yourself, and we'll see you in the next video.